Good old Greenville, South
Okay.
Kakalaka. Nice.
Hey, Anya from Munich, my hometown. So yeah. Okay, before we Anya from Munich. Oops. Okay. My hometown. So yeah. Hang on. Yeah, technology, all the screens, but we're gonna have more. We want to have Craig share his screen, and Zach and Craig. Yeah, they had this crazy live coding event idea. But before we head into the weeds, I have two announcements. One is the JavaScript for WordPress conference, the second annual, is going to happen in July 11th to 13th, and it's an online conference, and the call for speakers is open. And also the call for sponsors. So if you want to reach 1,000 WordPress and JavaScript developers, it'll be the right conference for you. And Zach, please tell us a little bit more about it, because here are your future attendees. I hope.
Well, howdy, folks. Yeah, we did it last year and it went really well. Basically, I just pinged as many JS devs who were doing cool things as I could find. And we had a great conference and it went well. So we're doing it again, but we're doubling down. There's going to be a full day of workshops. There's going to be a full day of contributing to the Gutenberg docs. And we're going to have a ton of speakers. Greg speaking, Birgit speaking, a whole range. So if you're interested on these topics, please come speak. If you want to reach this audience, as Birgit said, come sponsor. But either way, come hang out for the day. It's all 100% free, so no reason not to. And of course, we'll have archives on YouTube and all that. But thank you for giving that shout out. Super excited for this event.
Yeah, me too. Me too. I'm sorry I missed most of it last year, so I'm glad I can participate this year. And then tomorrow, for Gutenberg Times frequent watchers, we come back to our normal programming of live Q&A, and we talk with Sean Hesketh from WP 101 and Bud Krause from Joy of WP and Angela Bowman from Ask WP Girl about the opportunities and challenges teaching site owners and content creators how to use the new block editor. So join us tomorrow, 2 p.m. Eastern Daylight or 1800 UTC. So with that out of the way, I'd like to hand it over to Zach and Greg. So what is it that you're going to show us?
Sure. Well, Greg's going to give us a home tour like MTV Cribs of his house and his family. No, I'm just kidding. We're going to basically, we're going to dig into the RichText editor a little bit. So if you don't know, in the, what is it, Greg, 5.2 that's coming out, they're going to take TinyMCE out of WordPress completely. So it'll still be in the classic editor, right? But not in WordPress core, which is huge because they have built from the ground up an entire editor experience. Now we have our whole editor, which is the block editor. But when you go in to RichText, if you built some components, this is the component in WordPress to actually have like an editable text area. You could bold stuff, you could drop case, you know, it'll do a whole bunch of cool things for you. But there's a lot of APIs with it and there's some documentation, right? There's some tutorials, but I don't think it's gotten as much publicity. So I'm really excited because Greg is going to dig in here. We're going to learn a whole bunch of stuff. We're going to see a modern JavaScript workflow. This is probably going to be more comfy for some of you who have like taken the Gutenberg course or built a basic block, right? We're not going to start at ground zero. We're going to dive into the deep end because it's rare we get a chance to talk with Greg like this. So how does that feel? Does it feel like a pretty good overview? We're going to touch on the data API, customizing components, extending things a bit, right? Does that sound about right, Greg?
Yeah, that's exactly what you said. So let's start right over and I would share my screen.
And as you're getting set up, basically, we're going to let Greg talk and he's going to follow through. If you have questions about any of this, throw them in the chat. Birgit's going to collect them. We'll make sure we answer them. And I might just throw in some random stuff along the way to make sure he's explaining all of this and we understand the magic behind the scenes, right? Yeah. But Greg, man, this is on you. Give us a whirl. Show us how to do this.
Yeah, if you were watching some of the tutorials from Zach, so you should probably are aware that there is this nice trick inside the WordPress. So whenever you open your developer tools, you are able to see all the globals that are available inside WordPress. It's something that is there from a long time. So when Gutenberg project started, it was very important to bring that over also for Gutenberg. So you can do that the same thing for everything that's developed this way. So At the moment, we are still in WordPress 5.1, which is a bit complex because to make widgets page work, we are introducing something which will be called block editor, which will be something that can be run standalone without any backend like WordPress, which is huge because it will allow to do another very interesting things. However, for our talk today, the issue is that it's the rich editor text, which is at the moment here. It will be also exposed under block editor global, which translates to the package that is also published to NPM, which can be grabbed outside of WordPress and used this way. So the thing that is here is rich text component, and if you go to the editor is something which is over here. If you go to this paragraph block, if you go to the pull quote block, it's much more complex because you can have a few rich text component inside one block. So this thing, it's one rich text component. This thing here, that's another one. And you will see why that is important because we will get into that soon. And we probably should share links to that. So Bridget, if you could pass it over for the rich text.
Yep, I'm throwing those in as we go here. I'll make sure they.
That's amazing. There is also something that was developed that is specifically tailored to the rich text editor, which allows to add your own controls or even remove the existing controls. And we will show you how to do that soon. And based on this format API things, you can also do things like, so all the controls are stored inside rich text store, and there's this data API, which is available also under data global, which has this method called select, which allows you to get a given store, which this one is stored under the namespace core rich text, which translate exactly more or less to the same namespace you saw before. And if you use the method get format types, it will return for you all the existing controls. If we unfold that, then you will see that there is a bold, which translates to this thing. There's also code, image, italic, which is here, link, which is here. And if you go here, there are more of them, and there are 7. One of them is probably hidden, and there is also keyboard shortcut. We will get to that soon. Why is that important? It's important for you because if you want to change the existing behavior of the existing controls, you need to know all those names. And in fact, you don't need to go to the source code. You can explore it yourself inside your web browser, which is pretty huge in my opinion, because it makes everything so much easier. And in fact, I would say that at some point we might go to the state that even using API method could give you some hints on the JS console, so you could like play with that. So if you want to contribute to that and help us to get there, it's totally go to GitHub and open pull request. That would be great.
Love it, love it.
Yeah. So yeah, so I have also some links which we could share, which is about the rich text package. So that's important to also mention that all those components are there are 3 versions of those. It's hard to explain. So there is this code base lives on GitHub, but it also published to NPM, where you can grab that and install in your local project. How also it's exposed inside this global, which I talked about. Why is it important? It's important because when you are using something from Gutenberg, depending on the place you are seeing the code, that might differ a bit. So the best way to check the code you want to develop against is to go to the Gutenberg handbook. The reason for that is we will always pin the code that is used inside the code at the moment to the Gutenberg handbook. For the NPM package, the thing is that we try to publish this code as soon as it's possible, as it's ready. First, to share it with core, because there is still this distinction between Gutenberg, which is developed on GitHub, and there is WordPress core, which is still on track and on SVN, which makes it a little bit harder. However, to sync the code and make it easier, we do this distinction. So if you go to the NPM and see the documentation, it could be a little bit in the future. And if you go to the Gutenberg GitHub repository, there's even much more like in the future of the existence in the core. So that's very important to know about that, because that might bring you some confusions when you are developing code.
So Greg, I just want to reiterate what you're saying to make sure I got it. Like you're saying what is in the handbook is the most stable, then what is in NPM is kind of a step ahead of that maybe, and then what's in the plugin itself is like potentially even further along, right? Cool.
So with the recent changes we introduced, so what's on NPM, it's translate directly to what's in trunk on WordPress core. So you could get the idea. So what's in trunk is something that you can develop against for the WordPress, but it's going to be in the future version. Whereas what's on master, it can differ because it can change in the meantime.
Cool. I love it. Let's keep pushing, man. Love it.
Yeah. So another thing is that there is this format library. This is another thing that you can also access using format library. It's quite easy when you know the names to find them inside. And this one is quite important because we will be using this thing to use all the APIs to register your own control, unregister an existing control. I will show soon some examples. Are there any questions so far? Okay, let's continue.
I think keep rolling, man. Keep rolling.
Yeah, and also under the RichText, there are exposed some components that we will be using today. So for instance, there's all of them. No, they are under, sorry, block editor. If you type RichText, then there is RichText shortcut and RichText toolbar button and something unstable. So those components are something you can use. And to give you some example, RichText toolbar button is something that you see in here, which will be quite important later. And now that we showed, I presented the list of the existing controls, let's do some exercise and try unregister one of the controls and see how it can be done. So what I'm doing here is I'm using the latest JavaScript syntax, which I'm using destructuring just to unregister. When I will unregister,
could you maybe scroll down a little bit? I'm having some trouble. I don't know if that's just me seeing the very bottom of your console. If maybe you could clear it out and roll up again.
Yeah, sure.
It might just be my screen.
I can also do this. Does it help?
You know what? I think it was just my screen, so I think you were good. Sorry about that.
No worries. Let's continue. So I will unregister format type this way. So there is this method called unregister format type, which is exposed under RichText namespace. We use the name from the existing, this name from the existing control. And when I call that, what will happen, the name of this control will be saved under the name, and the rest of the structure that this control has will be under bold. So if you will see here, there is no bold anymore in here. And that's pretty nice when you are trying this kind of code inside the developer tools, because you don't need to, go through this process of going to your editor and stuff and back to the browser and refreshing the page if you only want to check some stuff. What's nice about this is now under name you have then this core bold. Under bold we have all the structure that is the same that we could see. The edit method in here is a function that is it's a component, React component behind the scenes. Or if you say WP element, which is something that we are using a special abstraction layer over React. In case there are some breaking changes, we will be able to provide a way to make the code compatible with the older versions of React, but at the same time, we will be able to make sure that all the code that was developed for WordPress is still backward compatible. And there's this tag name, which is strong because bold wraps the text that you select with bold, with strong, and there's a title. And what we'll do now is we can register back using WP RichText register format time. And we need to provide two parameters. First is the name of the format. We are using the variable we defined before when we were unregistering, and we are using bold object, which contains this structure with all the stuff. When I call it, see here, bold is here again, and we can go and just use it as it was before. So
Greg,
that's
we got a quick question. Did that, when you unregistered, did that apply to all instances of RichText? Or
oh yes, sure.
Yeah, cool.
Let me show it again. Oh, sorry, because why is that? Because I'm using this.
I think a quick answer is good. They're following you, but this is awesome. So that did go ahead and remove it from
you see in here and in here. So that's what I had in here. So we are registered now. Let's go and switch to the code. So what will be using here. I need to scroll it down. So I created a repository which is under GitHub, and there's this repository which is a basic plugin which does nothing. The only things it does when you execute is just console log this Gutenberg times thing. So it contains PHP entry point, which just ensures that you anchor your script. It's all based on the existing tutorials that are inside Gutenberg handbook. So you can do it yourself if you want to do some exercise. So it just follows, there are two tutorials. One is for creating your plugin, which just contains some code that allows you to do exactly the same thing what you see here, which enqueues just JavaScript file. And we will be using that later to do some further stuff. And there is also this index.js file with just console logs, and that's all it does at the moment. And there's also this package.json file, and it's using WordPress scripts. It's something that we developed as a side effect of developing Gutenberg, because we are using all the tools that you need to do all this stuff and use all the modern tools. And we figure out that people have a lot of issues of setting up their own plugin and all the like replicating the same setup we have. So we published to NPM recently the version that allows to build scripts yourself. So what we will be doing is, if you will go here, I have this repository cloned, and we will be using npm start command, which allows us to rebuild script whenever something changes. So when I will go here and say remove that, you will see that something is happening behind the scenes. If I go to this page and I refresh it, then there will be no message anymore.
I love it. And we threw up some links in here for some tutorials on all of these build tools. Fabian, who's watching, did one on WP script. So more resources, good stuff.
Did I miss something over here? And this is this section scripts, which I added according to the tutorial. So it's nothing fancy. I didn't do anything. And we'll be using, because as the things that I saw before are inside developer tools, I were using ES5. Zach, can you elaborate a little bit on that and explain what's the difference?
Yeah,
I know you are
so
doing all the time.
yeah, I mean, ES5 was the version of JavaScript for a good decade almost, and they decided that they would switch to an annual release. So ES6 came out, and that was like 10 years of stuff about JavaScript that they wanted to update. And now we're on what, ES10, I think, and less updates are coming out. But when we talk about ES6, we're generally referring to the new additions to JavaScript, which in some cases need build tools, in some cases don't and are just supported. But this is all going to be what I like to call modern JavaScript, because some stuff may be ES6, some may be 7 or 8, right? Gets a little mixed in there. But in general, that's what we're talking about. So hope that helps.
Yeah, so the nice thing about the tooling we are providing, it takes care of everything. So it ensures that the code that is produced, which is put inside this build folder, it does some magic. We don't care about that at all. But the crux of it is that this thing will work in every browser that you consider as supported by WordPress, which is a lot, including IE 11, some Android browsers which don't have many features. So it ensures that everything loads behind the scenes. So you don't need to care about it. You just can focus on writing modern code. And so we will be using, first we will do an exercise. So we will be using something similar we did in the developer tools console. So we will unregister bolt control, and we will add special code which will allow us to have more control where it's displayed. So instead of displaying everywhere, it will only be displayed inside pull quote block.
Good. That was a question, because we don't necessarily want our rich text edits to go to every single edit block or every single component, right? We want to narrow it down. Cool.
Yeah, also that's not that much code to write. We probably could add something like this to core, similar to how when you are registering blocks, you can define parent blocks, or I don't remember the exact name, but more or less what it does is if you want to have something like button, which is only displayed in a map block. So you can just define that this particular parent block is map, and we will cause the editor to display this block only in the context of the parent block, and that's it. So that's something like that we could add. So again, PR, pull request are always welcome.
All these places to contribute, y'all. Good. I love it. I love it. Greg, I'm going to push you a little bit just so that we get into some more of the code and keep ourselves on track here a little bit. We're doing great.
Yes, sure.
Let's jump into it.
So what we'll do first, we will need to pull in this register format type first unregister, which is under the same namespace as before. And with that in place, we need to ensure that this code is also bring inside. This thing is something that we will have to further improve, because every time you add this global inside JavaScript file, you also need to include it in PHP file. So let's go.
Hold on, buddy. I think there might have been a mistype on that one. I think we go back to your PHP and Q. RichText. Yeah, cool.
Yes, it's okay. So we will do basically the same thing, but this time we will also the structure. So we will be saying that there also needs to be edit method, which is the function, and it will just need to be assigned to this variable, because you will need that to make some modification. And again, we need to use core bold, and that thing alone.
Do we need one more period there? Yeah.
Yeah, it tells me everything because I'm using ESLint tools.
Good tooling, helpful.
Yeah, that's always helpful. So first of all, if I run that inside browser, then again, this will just, we can close that. Or maybe I will leave it open because it's helpful. So as you can see, it's quite expected. I want to show why it's important to do this, because what we see here is that this core bolt is not registered. Why is that? Because to make sure that it loads, we need to also bring dependency on WP format library, which is the module where all these core controls are installed. If I do it now, then everything works now properly. It's quite important to remember that the order of JavaScript files loaded is quite important, and all the dependencies needs to be defined. As you can see, it's no longer here. Let's go back to the editor. So now we have it. Now we need to register it back. So to do so, we need also to bring register format type, and yeah, we need to register it, name, and the bold. Just quick show that what I would like to see if you go in here. Now it doesn't. I was expecting that it will show that edit is missing. However, to do this trick to provide edit, we'll do some JavaScript magic from the modern JavaScript. So we'll the structure bolt. So what we are doing here, Zach, can you explain why I type?
Yeah, so we are basically going to go ahead and we're going to spread across bold, right? And get all of that out and then put in edit as well. But it looks like, are we going to rename edit to something, or have something else going along with edit after the colon?
This is because what we're doing now is we just registering it back, whereas we want to show it only in the case when it's inside pull quote only. So we'll create for now we'll create pull quote only component, because edit behind the scenes is a function which is also a React component. Just to give you an idea, as there is this plugin which is developed by Ella van Derp, which is a core contributor, and she's author almost of the code that we are using behind the scenes. So big shout out to her, and she did a really great job. And I also, if you want to learn more about all the things we are talking about today, she will be giving talk at React Europe in May and at JSConf Europe in June. So I'm really looking forward to see those talks.
Yeah, please go and tell her that she's doing amazing work. Not one of the most vocal members, but definitely building out this sucker. So a lot going on, doing good work.
Yeah, and this is where some magic begins, because now we'll need to do something to make sure that this pull quote only edit is behaving differently. So we will be using data API. Can you elaborate on that, Zach, and explain what's that exactly?
Sure. So we have a data API in WordPress, which is at the most basic level, a bunch of variables and functions that map to data in WordPress. So where we might have to make a custom PHP call, or we might have to make a custom API call, or maybe something we just can't even get access to, the data API is going to make it super easy for us to be able to access all of that stuff. And we go into it in the Advanced Gutenberg course, but this is a game changer. This is something we haven't dealt with in WordPress before, and definitely a new important skill for us to get comfortable with. So I'm glad we're digging into this a little bit. I'll just add too, as you're typing out these dependencies now, RichText format library, and we're going to put in the data API here. These are already on the page. So what we're doing here is just making sure that our JavaScript loads after them, because as we saw, they're all in the window object. So it's not like they're not there. We just need to make sure that they're there before our code executes. So what we're doing here is, it looks like compose is a way to map together some higher order components. So basically we're going to pass in edit. We're going to modify it a little bit, I'm guessing, and then we're going to give it back kind of a new modified edit. Is that kind of the direction we're going here?
Yeah, so let me show it right now. It's so, as you can see, let me close this one. So as you can see, bold is in here and it's everywhere at the moment, right? So we just redefining, but it's still the same. So compose, it allows us to, what it's doing is allows us to call functions which will be executed one of top another. So it's from functional programming. And this is just the thing that allows us to make the code look better, because we will have otherwise something looking like a Christmas tree, and this just allows us to do something that is as a pipe, so something that is executed one of the another. And there are some helpers which we provide in core. You don't need to necessarily know all the details how it work behind the scenes. The idea is that you can, based on the order of them, we will do some special things with them. So we select is coming from data API, and so we are having a lot of in-memory information stored inside memory, which we can pull in. One of them is, which we'll need in here, is how to get the currently selected block. And based on that, we will be able to use the name of currently selected name and check whether the name of the block is the one we expect, which will be core pull quote. And based on that, we will conditionally display all those code inside edit. Zach, is that clear?
Got to get back to my mute. Sorry, I was throwing in some links there. Yeah, I think that this is pretty clear. We're getting the ability to get some of this data from memory and then modify it or add it in. And if you have worked with React and some of these things, Compose is not unique to WordPress. So we are using some patterns here that are pretty common. And it's nice that we have these little tools built into WordPress because they do make our code a lot cleaner.
So as you can see now, it works still the same. The if condition, it just takes the function, and based on the true or false, it will be changing the state of that. So if I will provide the false, so that will make there is no bolt anymore, right? So we will use that behavior just to grab the name of the currently selected block and pass it over from the select. So to do so, we need to use select helper method, and from core there is this block editor store, which contains the detail, all those information we need. There is method called get selected block.
And if you haven't, I'm sorry, I was just going to throw in, if you haven't taken the time to look through the documentation, we could link up to the data API. There's a ton of these new functions to learn, and a lot of them are documented. I don't know if this block editor is totally documented yet. That's part of why we're digging in ahead of time. But yeah, so we're getting out the selected block, and then we're going to return that, and then that should be available for us. Yeah, next time around to be able to check, we could just do selected block name and see what we're working with.
Yeah, I'm trying to type it fast. So what we are doing now, we are calling this method. It can return the currently selected block, which is an object. So we will just need to double check that it's returned, because there can be, of course, the case when there is no block selected. And then if there it's selected, we will pick its name, and the selected block name will be passed over to the another. So when we go into in condition, it also will pass all the props that it contains. So we will be able to take selected block name and compare against the one that we are expecting here, so which is pull quote. And that's all we need at the moment. I think that's all that is necessary to make it work. So if you go to paragraph, there is no bolt. If you go to pull quote, the bolt is there. So that's all done. So as you can see, it's not that that lots of code to make sure that it's working.
Before you go on, I just want to re-explain real quick if you're not familiar with this kind of HOC pattern or higher order component. So what we're doing is we're basically modifying the edit component, which is actually coming at the end in line 16 there. So we pulled out the edit function, and then switch screens here. Sorry, can you go back to the code real quick? Yeah, okay, so we pull that out. Then we're basically writing some checks. We're figuring out if this block is selected and getting the name of it, and then just doing a quick conditional check. And it's only going to apply these changes if it is the core pull quote, right? So we could also modify this instead of triple equals, we could do a negative or a is not equal to, and then it would happen for everything that's not that one block. So cool. I don't know if that helps, but just might be some new code here you're seeing.
Yeah, okay. So one of the requests we get before this show, it was how can I add a control which will change the color of the selected text. So it's something similar like in here and here. So if you check this plugin, Advanced RichText Tools, it contains a way of doing so. For you can change inline text color, inline background color, and it's applied using inspector controls. With inspector controls, what that means is it means that it's applied in here. However, we will be doing something now which will apply this code in here, which is going to be much more challenging, I think. So we'll do something quite simple first. So we'll just register a new format, which will be something that we will call text color. So to do so, let's register a new variable because we will need it later. And what else do we need? We'll maybe let me remove that, this and this, to make it easier to follow. Besides, we will also need to register this format, so we will use this name. So there are a couple of things that we need to register for every control. So one of them is title. So let's say text color. There is also tag name. Let's pick span. So basically, tag name is something that will be inserted inside the, if you go in here and go to edit as HTML, there is nothing.
That's what that's going to be your wrapping tag, right?
Yeah, so the wrapping tag will be is EM here, but it will be span. And there's one more thing that we need to make it work. It's the class name, because when you are using, it's the easiest way to give an indicator that this control is wrapped with something. It's through the class name. So when you can, if you can have multiple spans, but if you assign a unique class name, then it's easy to identify for the editor what it's going to be editing.
And I'll just throw out, we are a pretty international crowd here. When you do this, things like title, we'd want to use the __, but we're just kind of going quick through here to demonstrate.
Yeah, that's true. But that's another big topic.
We'll have you back for that one.
So what we need now is, again, we need to define this edit method, which the one we used previously, we used from the bolt control. Now we will need to implement it ourselves, which is not that easy, but also it's not a super complex stuff to do. So we'll be using a function, which is more or less something like a component. And this component provides props, which is an object, something like a regular React component, and it provides following props which we'll be using is active. It indicates whether it's selected and or not. So if you go back, so Okay, something is broken now, so let's get back later when I have this code
Yeah,
fixed.
I finished coding it out. Yep. And what you folks will find is if you've built a block, you've seen the edit component before, right? Throughout WordPress, and it's going to start expanding when you need to build a custom component. I believe, right, that the component name is going to be, or the name of that setting is usually going to be edit, right? So we can come to expect when we need to build some component and where we see edit, we know that we're getting some sort of React element there.
So probably it was drawing.
Oh,
Yeah, okay.
my 5 Gutenberg did too much.
Yeah, I wanted just to make sure that it works before we'll go deeper into things.
Did we mess up? Somebody pointed out, is our namespace correct on line 5, the Gutenberg times with multiple U's? Was that breaking things for us?
Yeah.
No. I think the issue was that because the component wasn't returning anything.
We didn't return anything yet. Got it. Cool.
In React, you need to return at least null. Just
good catch, Anya.
Yeah. So we'll be using JSX, which is, can you, Zach, explain really quick?
Yeah, so normally in React, when you create an element, you call react.createElement. But JSX is an extension for the JavaScript syntax, so that if we write what looks like HTML behind the scenes, it will go and parse it. And actually, it won't create DOM nodes, but it will create React elements that we can then return and use. So if you've heard of HTML in your JavaScript, they're talking about JSX here. And this is something that you do need Babel to configure because browsers do not know how to read HTML in your JavaScript. So this is good and why we have scripts running. He's also going ahead and hopefully that will evolve. Every time you pull in something new, you got to make sure that you are making sure that it's enqueued before your JavaScript. And it could get lengthy, right? You could have 10 different dependencies there when you start building complicated things.
It's a real issue also for core, so we are thinking about some improvements around that. However, I don't want to get too lengthy about that because we are short of time and I want to go to the real stuff. So there is this RichText toolbar button component, which is provided by core. It allows you to build the same control that we have for bold and for other elements. And depending, so there is number of whitelisted blocks like bold, italics, which is displayed by default on the first view of the block toolbar. However, some of them are displayed in the dropdown, which have is also the default behavior for all the non-core blocks. The reason for that is because we want to provide some control over how it's behaving. There will be ways to change that, so you could just define yourself the default ones. However, it's not something we'll cover today.
As you're typing, I'm gonna let you type and talk about that for a second. So if you go in again and you look, the first buttons are gonna be bold italic, right? And then there's a drop down and you could add your own custom ones that go in there. But for a while, I guess you haven't been able to like put yours as the first ones in there, but I guess it sounds like that's coming. But today what we're gonna build, I believe, is just gonna go in the drop down because it's a lot easier, right? So the cool thing about the way they're building this is there's hooks everywhere to extend and customize all this. And okay, so it looks like you added a title, you added an on-click event, which is going to handle what happens when you click on this button. And then we're seeing, okay, is the actual thing active? We're determining, and that'll determine the styling and if it's like indented right or not, should help.
Yeah. So I think we have everything just to make sure that it's displayed at the moment. So if you go over here and open the toolbar, and it's in this dropdown, we have this text color. If we select some text, apply that, nothing happens. But if you go to the source, nothing has happened. Why is that?
It's called live coding.
It is.
That's the beauty of it.
Let's get back here.
I think, do we need to have the on-click event set up for what is actually going to happen when we click on it?
At some point, yes, but it should work without
Ah,
that.
so it should already wrap the spans in even when you just click on that?
Or maybe not. Maybe that's expected. Anyways, let's go further. So what we have now is like is active is the state of the toolbar. When it's active, then it's indicated inside the UI. That means that it's applied. So we'll also can have value. Value is the value of the rich text. It's not the value of the controls. So this is something that the text that you have inside. Inside the rich text memory, which is a special structure, and there are special helpers to work with that. And so we need to bring those special helpers just to be able to use them. And they are inside rich text. So in here, we will need something to apply the format first. So the thing that's called apply format. Everything is documented and available in the Gutenberg handbook. So you will have to reference to that if you want to find more details. So there's this on change thing that probably that's why it doesn't work behind this at the moment. So on change takes this. So what we'll do now is we will take the value, we will do call apply format. This will do some crazy modification behind the scenes, and it will ensure that this our control is applied to the text. And to do so, we'll have to use this apply format, which takes value, and then it also takes an object. And in this object, you will need to define type, and that's why I used types is the name of the control, and the other stuff is attributes. And in this case, because you want to apply color, so what we'll have to do is provide style, provide color, and we will do something like red for start. And yeah. Let's see if that works, then we can debug further.
And I guess what you put in there is really going to depend on what your button is doing, right? But in this instance, we're looking at how do we apply formatting to stuff, and look at that.
It works, yeah.
Yay.
Yeah, so as you can see, there is two things. There are three things. There is span, which is the tag name. There is the style, which we applied using attributes. And there's this red color, and there is also this class name, which is used. So that's everything that's applied here. So if you go here, this like at the moment it's active, so you can see that it's highlighted in here. If we click again, it should be removed. Probably I didn't select it properly. Now the reason why it doesn't work is because we need to handle it ourselves. And to do so, we can use is active state. So we will be branching our code. So when the control is active, we need to use another helper function, which in this case is called remove format, and which takes value again and the name of the format, and that's all which we need to provide. And also we'll have to return from here just to make sure that the other branch is not called at all. And we'll also need to bring it in here. And if we reload the page, now we can no. Okay, one more thing, we of course needs to call this on change. So there are a few things to take into account here, as you can see. So this on change is crucial to make this work. And also there are those helpers that help you modify the existing value structure. You don't need to know how it looks behind the scenes. You shouldn't be looking at it at all, to be honest, because it might change behind the scenes if we need to do some crazy optimizations to make it better or whatever. And I also don't know, I was reviewing the code, but it changes so rapidly. So probably there's something
Well,
different.
I'll just throw out too, folks. This is the future of JavaScript for WordPress. Okay, it's going to be learning a lot of functions. It's going to be getting a lot of helper stuff that's already built out for us, and then kind of plug and playing it. So we see here that when we get is active, when we get the on change, all of that is going to be doing a lot of behind the scenes magic for us, which is great. But it does mean we got to learn some new functions. We got to learn how to wire them, and eventually, even though these patterns look really new, y'all, you're going to get as comfortable with higher order components and manipulations as you were with WP query. It's just going to take time, but I'm glad that you're breaking all this down for us.
Yeah, and so let's do one more thing, because I can show you that we can apply multiple formats like this. So we can define the name of the color. Let's do it this way. Let's move it in here. We can use template literals. Is it how it's called, Zach? I don't remember the exact name.
Yeah,
so,
basically strings that we could put variables in. Yeah, with backticks.
Yeah, and this way it should. What I'm trying to do.
Making it dynamic here. Let me ask you, do you think in general it is, now we're inline styling stuff, do you think in general folks would probably want to like just create classes and then have a separate style sheet? Or what's your opinion on inline styling with stuff like this in this particular context? Do you think it's
in this
okay
particular context, it depends really, because if you want to provide only subset of colors, then maybe class name is okay. If you want to have orange, which is you have a special team and each team can define their own shade of orange, then that might be fun. It all depends on the use case you have. Cool. In this case, I think that if you would like to develop it further, then you would probably try to find a way to use some dynamic ways of having something similar to the classic editor, which allows you to change the color you apply, the same you see in Word and other editors. So, it really depends, and that's the most often things you would hear. So let me just double check that it still works. This autosave thing is really annoying. I'm not quite sure why it is happening. Anyway, it's development environment, so we shouldn't care so much. And what I want to do now is I want to wrap this thing and provide you with more controls, just to show you the idea that it's quite easy to, when you have one working control, then providing more control is quite straightforward. And I'm using for each method, we should iterate on every color in here. It will assign into the color variable, which is in here. So it's something not that complex. And now we should see 3 controls when I refresh the page.
Buttons on buttons on buttons.
Yes, you can see there's color red because we probably did something wrong. So what I'm expecting,
it might be because it was already on the page.
No, I think that there's one place where I didn't provide there is still red somewhere probably. No. Let me check real quick. Color.
What if we just delete the block
no,
and refresh it? Was that?
So the thing that what's happened here is we use the same class name, which is quite important here. It probably was explaining that the message was explained that, but I didn't read it because it's live coding, everything happens. Now when because but it's also a nice way to see that you have this error messages which allow you to so it's already registered using the class name. So it exactly said that, so I just should read it and that would be much easier to fix it.
Do you think it really helps when you read the error messages?
Sometimes. So as you can see now we have 3 controls, and that's quite important to show you one thing here, because we can apply multiple controls like that. If you go in here, all of them will be applied. So your is wrapped with both green and red. So you need to remember that, because every control you are using is providing their own wrapper. It's not that they are matched together, and the order of lines is also important. And yeah, I think that's all I got.
Well, this is awesome. I learned something great today.
All right, let me ask those of you who watching, do you think you could have just intuitively just figured this out? Or are we grateful that he took the time to show us this? Because I think you were saving all of us a ton of time, man. Let me ask you, what other kind of things, now we're wrapping stuff in an element. Can we insert crazy things? Can we go beyond just wrapping? Or is that really the constraints of like what we're looking at today is meant to do, is just this, take some text, wrap it in there? Can we inject a whole nother component into this? How far can we push what we've seen today?
So you mean about the edit implementation, right?
I mean about this filter of modifying stuff in RichText.
Oh yeah, so you can do some modifications. If you go to this example, which I shared before from the RichText control, so there is something that Ella is doing with styles. So she's using, there's this helper method called the get active format, and it allows you to get the actual element, which is for this format control, and you will let you access things like style, so you would be able to do some modifications around that. So I think it's much more advanced. There are lots of helpers. I don't even remember the names of them. I no longer share screen, but if you go to WP RichText and try to see all the methods that are exposed there, I think that there are a lot of them. You can get text content. You can, what else? You can do HTML string, toggle format. Toggle format is pretty nice. Bolt is using that. So this just allows you to, in easy way, do the same thing I did, which is with apply format and remove format. So there's toggle, which just simplifies stuff. You need to do all those conditions yourself.
Right, that's awesome. Well, thank you so much. That's wonderful. And you timed it quite nicely. Yeah, we are now at
yeah, look at that, right on the hour. This is how
right
things keep around here, yeah. You know?
Well, that's a fantastic demonstration. Thank you, Greg and Zach, for putting this all the work together, especially Greg, to kind of condense all this knowledge to this 1 hour of things. The video recording will be on YouTube in a few minutes when it all renders. And we have the post with the transcript and the links again on the Gutenberg Times on Saturday. The code is published, and I think I shared the link, but I'm going to share it again on the GitHub repository, on Greg's GitHub repository. So that's all I have. Do you have anything to add, Craig, Zach? How can people get in touch with you? And what else?
Greg, man, give us the 1 minute preview, man. What's it like to be on the team here? What's it like being in the trenches with all of this, man? Are you pretty siloed on one particular thing? Do you see all of it? Is it your fault if we have a problem with Gutenberg? Do we contact you on Twitter? Or what's it like, man?
So the code is growing a lot, so it's amazing to be on the Gutenberg core team. I think that we are still learning ourselves to learn to make it, you know, something that's easier to use for everyone. I particularly were involved in all the extensibility efforts last year, and I'm still continuing doing that. So the thing that I'm currently looking at is blog directory and the way to make blog registration easier and easier to discover also inside WordPress.org, and for you inside WordPress when going to the plugins subpage.
That's fabulous. So the blog directory is kind of the one thing. There's also a blog. There's the blog registration API is also out there, because right now you register duplicate code, one with PHP and one with for the dynamic blocks and one with JavaScript. for the static blocks, but the two environments are not aware of each other's blocks. So that's kind of, and there is a call for comments out, a request for comments on the Make core blog. So that would be, and on GitHub. So that would be great if you are interested in read through it and kind of think through it and help organize that. Zach, you have anything that you want to kind of leave the people with?
Man, peace and love forever and ever, something like that. I mean, I really just want to thank Greg again, because like I could not be doing the course and the teaching I'm doing without your help, buddy. Like every time you answer a question and all the stuff that you're doing, like I'm really grateful and trying to take this contact point and share it with as many people as we can. So I'm really glad that you came on and folks got to hear a little bit and see a little bit. So just hugely grateful. And of course, Birgit, to you, keeping up with the news. Like this is how I keep up with this stuff, following you. So thank you both. Just grateful.
Well, thank you, Zach and Craig. So that's it then. Happy good burging or guten Tag or goodbye. That's it for today. Come see us tomorrow, not live coding, but we're talking about teaching Gutenberg. So bye-bye.
Thank you all.
Bye.
Ciao, everyone.
Ciao.